Today is really day 5. Of the April 90 7-day retreat in Springwater. Three questions this morning, if we get to them, are of real interest and I'm quite sure of commonness. The first I'd like to touch upon is not really a question, it is the expression of a state of being which probably happens to anyone going to a silent retreat for several days. It goes something like this. I'm sick and tired of the whole thing. Of meditative inquiry, of questioning, of this method or that method, or trying to find yet another one. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I want to do. I'm tired. What's the use? That comes up to what's the use of this whole thing? I haven't changed, nothing has happened. Maybe here and there in the past some flickering that may happen here too, but then it goes again and it's this state. We've gone yesterday or the day before through such a state of blahness by not moving away from it, not calling it names, by not calling it a name and therefore not knowing it, not knowing how to react to it, crawling into it as it were, if one wants to put it that way. Not escaping. Not moving away, not finding fault with it. Seeing that all of that, finding fault and trying to get something different, or all the conclusions of despair, all the questions of doubt, what's the use, that is already separation. And maybe in this process realizing that this is separation, because at that moment there's moving away from all the feelings and sensations, moods that are right now taking place. So we're not going to go through that again. We've done that. It's recorded. I'll just ask this question, which we didn't ask the other day. Why is one tired of this whole thing? The fatigue setting in. Why? And we're asking further whether it may be that something is being touched upon which does not like touching or being touched. The foundation of our whole existence in which we are finding and have found a pseudo-security. This whole complex feeling, imaging, ideating about me. That's our foundation of existence. What I am. What I have been in the past, what I am now, and what I will continue to be in the future. This me which exists in time. And maybe the fear of that being rattled, punctured, called into question, called into total question in what we call this work. Not maybe as roughly as the voice right now may have sounded, but gently questioning the whole thing and seeing it in the light of this questioning, wherever it pops up, this image of myself to which I'm desperately attached, with which I may be deeply in love, deathly afraid of losing. And not to accept this or reject this as dogma, but since it's being said and said again over and over, to maybe discover for oneself the manifestations of the image and the attachment to it, or the judgment of it, the putting down of it, which is also energizing the whole process. And observing the inklings of fear that come up when there is the prospect that one may, without these images and memories which give the energy gushes or the energy deflations, that without that one may be nothing except this organism in a world of aliveness. But one doesn't feel it that way at this moment. It's just the idea of being nothing calls up scaredness, fear, anxiety, and to watch that too. How an idea triggers the anxiety, and therefore I don't want to have anything to do with this. The setting in of fatigue or tiredness. I want to be any place but here, is what comes up in thought or desire. Desire coming up because another place is already visualized in the mind where one could be. Doing something deliciously satisfying. Is that maybe how it is? We're wondering. It's an open question. The question of how far will one go with this work? How deeply will one delve? One person says you often talk or write about the root source of everything. What is that? Can it be touched? The root source of all of our conflicts and problems, collisions, sufferings, and pleasures is the thought-created sense of self with all of its emotions and capabilities to trigger energy, immense energy, under circumstances in this body. Thought of becoming famous or somebody in the future can provide energy till one is 85. My husband gets a journal from ARP. It's called Modern Maturity, and he reads it. And sometimes he clips articles out for me to read. Some of them are very good. 2. There's just one right now I've got on next to my bed on the functioning of the brain to stimulate interest, but also to tell people you're not at the end of your life. There's still lots of things you can do to keep kindling this looking forward to something, hoping for something, being something, becoming something. We're not criticizing it, we're looking at it, how we live. Live in this stream of self with all the other selves, a totally mutually reinforcing stream. And here and there, someone says, can one look at that whole stream as it manifests in oneself? Not in order to get rid of it, cross over to the other shore, or whatever all has been said about the stream, but to understand it deeply as it gives evidence of itself, in one's moment to moment, living and listening and looking. And in this moment to moment listening and looking, beginning to understand the power of that stream, the power to create sorrow, conflict, and suffering, as well as pleasure. The pleasure of thinking what I will do or attain tomorrow, based on what I've read now or in the past. We're not talking what we did the other day about the joy of just being here as an inseparable part of this whole living, silent, sounding universe. That joy is not based on thought of self, that springs up like a well on its own, when there is not the self-concern, the self-involvement or self-infatuation or self-fear, fear of ending in the self. The fact that the question brings up anxiety or restlessness or tiredness is no reason to move away from it. It's up to each one. There's nothing required or demanded or dictated here. We're publicly, openly questioning together. Whether one will enter into this is up to each one of us. The fact that one feels out of sorts, without energy, exhausted, indifferent, or whatever, is no reason not to experience that state in a fresh way without conclusions about it. Leaving it open to be felt and revealed on its own. Wondering about all of one's conclusions, including this idea of emptiness or the void or the black hole that would be there if I am not there, the me is not there. These are all assumptions aroused by the fear of not being. But can one explore that fear of not being wordlessly? Not knowing? That's what we're afraid of not knowing. But thought cannot know not knowing. Thought can only think and produce knowledge. Thought is incapable of tackling a state of not knowing. And with that, it arouses anxiety in the body. And the so aroused body says there's something dangerous here. Sends a signal to the brain. Brain starts looking for dangers. It can always find one. Always imagine something. Like black holes. When we were little, we were always told, close the door behind you. Never allowed to leave doors open. And the moment it got a little bit cooler, close the windows. Couldn't leave the windows open. There was almost a phobia about having open doors or windows. Because when it's warm in the summertime, at home we had no screens, that didn't exist. So you didn't leave them open so you wouldn't get a fly inside. And here, what we're asking is, can windows and doors remain open? Or better yet, step out of the house? A few brave people who've already stepped out the house with their lunch. When the sun came out, it was probably not so brave for them, but it looks brave for someone who's inside, still a little chilly. One finds a completely different world, doesn't one, when one steps out of the house? Morning or night. There's something inside the house, inside the enclosure, that prevents being in touch with the whole thing. The lights inside hide the seemingly much weaker lights of the night, the stars, the moon, if they're out. The air, the sounds, the spaciousness of the sky and ground. The other two remaining questions are, what does it mean to contribute something to society, to the world? Because I have a real deep feeling that's what I ought to be doing, or would really love to do. Not just a feeling of obligation, although that has to be examined. We are, particularly in the Christian tradition of doing good works, and the Buddhist tradition of gaining or accumulating merits, we are deeply conditioned that this is part of the path of righteous living, being pleasant unto God or unto karma, to do good things. So not to dismiss out of hand that those things don't motivate me. The deeper programs are concealed. We've talked about this off and on. And one cannot assume that they are not an ingredient in this urge to contribute to the world, to do something for people for whom one feels an affinity. And the remaining question was asked not just by one person. You mentioned in a talk, someone said that you know that things here in this work will take care of themselves. It was in connection with giving a talk, not thinking about it ahead of time to arouse worry, anxiety, but having learned over the years that this will take care of itself. And the question that came up with a couple of people is, do you have faith in this work? That it will take care of itself? Or is this what faith is? Trying to get to whether I have faith or what faith is. So maybe we'll get to that in connection with the first question, or we'll see, we don't know. Back to contributing to society or to the world, making some contribution in this life, which otherwise appears to be so meaningless. Self-centered. And maybe also blah, low energy. I think before asking what it means to make a contribution to this world or society or other people, can we ask what this world, this society of other people are? What are the other people? What is society? What is the world? Is that felt as something outside of myself? Separate? Divided? Me and the others? Me and the world? Is that how it feels? Me and the other people. Us and them, me and them. To let the question sort of not just sink in, but evoke whatever feelings there are. There are feelings of separation, aren't there? What am I? What is the world? Or the people? What separates us? What is different about us? Can one plumb this question freshly, not try to seek for the old phrases that one may have remembered? Because that's just phrases, that's not reality. What is the reality of me and the others? Who are these people that I want to help or contribute something to? And again, who and what is that me that wants to contribute? That feels a need for fulfillment. This is how it was put by one person. Wanting the fulfillment of contributing. And let's say it now and whenever it will occur to me, we're not beginning to judge this whole thing. It's not a judgmental process we're engaged in. We're looking. I'm not saying it is wrong to have this feeling, or wrong or bad to want to be fulfilled, or selfish and calling it names. Whatever labels or words we use are tentative. And if they evoke emotions, then to beware of that. We're not intending to evoke emotions, but to look clearly as possible at what is this need for fulfillment through contribution or through helping others. Where does it arise from? Does it arise out of the fullness, the welling up of love? That may be part of it. Does it arise out of a feeling of emptiness, of discontent, insufficiency? Feeling inadequate, inferior. We human beings feel that way deep down. We have that same base. We were all born as totally helpless babies to what seem to be totally omniscient and omnipotent parents. And our inadequacies in doing things at different stages, our insufficiencies, became deposits of memory. With an urge programmed right in to make up for it someday. Why this is so, or how this is so, I don't know, but it is so. Can observe it in oneself and in little children. The urge to do unto others as was done unto oneself. The urge to do unto the weaker one as one becomes the stronger one, as was done to oneself when one was the weaker one in the presence of the stronger ones. Either protect and care, or manipulate or abuse, or both. And that we share, that's our common base for all of us. And in that there's no me versus you, or us versus them. We're all in the same boat, in the same stream. Does that make sense? Or does that sound dogmatic? It's not meant to be. One can observe and learn as one goes. One watches oneself, one's responses, and watches one's own children or the children all around one. In the stores, in the street. At a friend's house and so forth. If one is, of course, teaching children, there it is. So evident. The kindergarten or preschool politics. Little tiny mini power politics. So that question is explorable, isn't it? Why do I want to contribute? And not analyze it, but watch it. Analyze meaning just giving from the top of the head or from the top of the knowledge, what one has read, answers, but to observe it alive in action as these thoughts come up or as the feelings come up of a nagging insufficiency, lack, and the allurement of doing something for others, helping others. I hope people don't think I'm bad-mouthing it. I'm observing it. We've been observing over the days how one thought of something can set the whole body into a state of energy to do. A thought of what I might do can set the heart beating, the adrenaline pumping, whatever all goes on chemically. 30,000 chemicals are supposedly circulating in this body, in addition to the ones we take. Circulating naturally. Chemicals have gotten a very bad name, but we are chemicals, as a fact. And toxic ones in there too, when anger comes up or anxiety. So, what would we like to contribute? And what comes up with many people, and I remember it from my own life, wanting to help people feel better, understand better, know themselves better, solve their problems, free themselves from unnecessary suffering, live happier lives than we do. I remember after I left graduate school because the work was not what I needed to do. The psychology was behavioristic. I had to go in Saturdays and Sundays to feed the white rats, that was a nice experience to drop this hideous idea about rats. Of course, they were white and quite tame. You could stroke them. And we didn't put electrodes in their brain or anything like that. They just had to run mazes. it seemed all a little bit childish. But I didn't see it that way. I just didn't want to continue doing it. There was a lot of statistics involved. You had to take advanced courses in statistics to understand psychology. So then I just began reading on my own. One of the first books I remember that really got me very enthusiastic and excited was a book that linked psychoanalytical insight with human history, explaining history, and not way back, but maybe since the Renaissance or some such time, what happened in terms of psychoanalytical findings and concepts. And I found that immensely exciting, that one could look in a different way at what has been happening. History in school was one of the drabbest subjects for me, because it was constantly altered as Germany invaded new countries and enemies became friends and friends became enemies. The history always had to be changed. The books were collected and then redistributed with a new version, new maps. And of course, the essence of history was remembering the kings and the wars that the kings led, or whatever other leaders there were, lost or won. And I had to remember those. Well, you probably did this here too. You had to remember your times when important wars were won. So reading this book, and I must say, I'm quite sure I didn't just read intellectually. I was also looking. I began having psychoanalytic dreams and become involved in this thing. There was participation in this, not just intellectual, but the enthusiasm of a housewife at home with a child, no job, no career, and finding out something, and the energy that came from it was tremendous. And my desire was, I ought to share this with other mothers who are also at home with their kids. Sometimes I'd be in the situation to be with another mother, maybe riding someplace. I don't know what we were doing. I have found maybe she wasn't interested in this. And I was not of the nature to found a mother's club for discussion of history seen in psychoanalytical terms. That was totally outside my way of being. I was not an organizer or a public figure. But I remember very well, and that's must have been in the 50s or early 60s, the reading a certain release from something. Here was something to study, find out the energies coming from this, and wanting to share that with others. The sharing would just take place as we happened to get together, two people who were interested in the same thing, which was not very frequently. But I think there was some significance in thinking back right now. We were talking about it with one person this morning. There was no rushing out immediately to do something. But there was more and more study of books, reading. To the point of saturation. You can just read so much, and then it's like too much food. And then through all the reading of getting into mythology and into Eastern religion and into Zen, getting involved in Zen training. And realizing what did I realize? That there was a different way of proceeding, which was not through book learning and book study. Coming in touch with oneself in a different way. I can't remember exactly how things were. It's really not clear anymore. But what I do remember is that I was asked quite early to do teaching someday, and later on to do the work at the center, to help with this work at the center, take it over when the teacher there retired. Which caused me immense anxiety immediately. That thought, that demand, or that proposition, which was in a form, I took it in the form of a demand. Because it was vaguely clear that I couldn't work the way work took place at that place. I couldn't do that. But how I would work, I didn't know. So was there the desire to help other people, to contribute something? That was there all along. Ever since I remembered it came for the first time. But it was also clear that I had to understand how to do it, or had to understand something other than what was going on there. But working with people in a different way. Because I was doing counseling, I'd been asked to do counseling with people, and something emerged there of being thrown again into a situation for which I had no skills, no learning, no education, no degree, and yet people with problems. And realizing that one doesn't have to have a method or a skill to come together and talk about problems. What one needs to do is listen. Listen to each other. Listen to the immediate urge to want to help this person in a conventional way, because one was asked to help people in counseling. And yet that this urge, when one followed and tried to advise somebody, usually didn't work. Advising somebody or telling someone what to do can be fulfilling if one doesn't observe deeply what advising does to oneself and to another. To me, it's fulfilling. To another, it's not helping that person to find out for herself or himself. Not understanding the problem oneself. That we can work on together. But what the action will be cannot be imposed on another. It can be, but then it's not right action. Then it comes from following a leader or a guide, an authority. So with the beginnings of this kind of new way of working, the immense teaching or volumes of books of Krishnamurti dropped into my lap. Came upon it. And this is what I read and studied, and read and studied. Study meaning looking for myself. What was he talking about? What was he pointing to? Which always happened in simple English. No complicated, occult, mysterious, allegorical, Zen-like language. Simple English. And in reading that and studying it and looking for myself there, out of this emerged some clarity about what I was doing, what problems are about, and about needing to look for oneself, and that it's possible to see for oneself. So, how did I get into all of this? This was not planned. It goes into the next and last question, doesn't it? Which we may have to leave for tomorrow. Whether there is faith in things taking care of themselves in this work of looking and listening within and together without authority. I don't know whether we went sufficiently into this, contributing something to the world. Because we had to ask, what is the world? Are these people other than myself? Am I confused? Can I help someone when I'm confused about me and the others? That they're out there and I'm here and there's a gulf between us, a separation. Then that confusion will go into the work, won't it? And yet I'm not saying you got to be clear or enlightened before you can help somebody. And I don't think in those terms. I want to find out what's going on here as in everybody else. And out of that, we will meet. People are interested. Sometimes just up to a degree, and then goodbye. Maybe goodbye today, but coming back tomorrow or in 10 years. You're not putting strings on anybody or holding anybody. So is that contributing something to the world? Looking at our confusion together and alone? And maybe in this looking and listening, a clearing of the fog? And with the clearing of a fog, the coming into being of a fresh intelligence and a lovingness, which is not separate, which does not separate me and the world, me and the others, and therefore will work with whatever happens, with whoever comes. Looking at confusion without condemnation, looking at feelings of insufficiency and the urge to fulfill without right or wrong. But looking, not pasting over it, denying it or upholding the image of the person who is, I don't know what all images we have. All we need is to look. And there they are. be another thing maybe to look at tomorrow. People telling me very frequently in this retreat, I'm just seeing, walking in here or sitting in the line, in the meeting line, I just realize how much I want to be liked by you. Want to be approved by you. Want to appear worthy or intelligent or clever or whatever. These are images that one comes upon. And the image that Toni is looking for somebody to please her is also an image. You see, this is how we come upon it. And by noticing it and verbalizing it, talking about it, looking at it, and maybe dispelling the whole thing. Even though the habit may be strong, next time there may be still the desire to be liked by her, but one can see it much quicker than yesterday. And it doesn't have to interfere in a confusing way in this directness of talking and questioning or sitting quietly together. Is this contributing something to the world? The question doesn't hold, does it? What is the world? We are that. If the fog lifts in Springwater, will it lift in Washington, South Africa? Or will it close up the next moment in Springwater again? One has to watch. Here, it's an individual matter, because the individual is the whole. We are not separate. We will end here for today.